Again, the base rate of interest has gone up by 0.25 percentage point to 4.25%. Founder of the mortgage lenders, Gen H, Will Rice, told LBC it's due to the unexpected rise in inflation.
Until yesterday, a lot of people thought that the Bank of England might actually be done. We might have seen the last of the rate hikes. But yesterday there was a new inflation report out from the ONS, and it was frankly an absolute stinker. It was far worse news than anybody was expecting and showed inflation accelerating again.
Police have fired tear gas in Paris, where it's been the 9th day of protests against changes to pensions and France's retirement age. President Emmanuel Macron's used special powers to push it up by 2 years to 64. Well, LBC presenter Lewis Goodall is in Paris this evening.
Street after street in Paris tonight is on fire. Partly the rubbish that has built up for week after week has been set aflame. Buildings are being set on fire. And it is a truly classic French protest in this regard. But it's not just in Paris either. Bordeaux City Hall, I've just seen on my phone, has been set ablaze as well. And there have been protests all day right across the country.
Firefighters have brought under control a fire at a 5-storey hotel near Paddington train station in central London. Half of the hotel's ground floor was on fire and neighbouring properties were evacuated. It's not known how it started and an investigation is underway. The boss of TikTok's being grilled by American politicians over security concerns, insisting the app is not an agent of China. Here, the Houses of Parliament have banned the platform from its network of devices, as has the Scottish Government. And transgender athletes who've been through male puberty are to be banned from women's athletics events. Lord Coe, the president of the sport's governing body, says it's vital to protect the female category.
Where the science is insufficient to justify maintaining testosterone suppression for transgender athletes, the Council agreed it must be guided by our overarching principle, which is to protect the female category.
In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 67 points at 74.99. The pound buys $1.23 and €1.13. LBC weather this evening. Rain will clear in the south, but the west may see some showers. Scattered showers in the north and a low of 6 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
3 minutes past 8 on LBC. Well, it's Thursday, the 8 o'clock hour. We always like to get one person into the studio, give them a bit of a quizzing and then allow you to ask your questions to them. Well, today it's Steve Hartshorn, who's chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales. We've done this once before, Steve. Welcome. Thank you. You've been in post a year now. Quite an interesting time to have your job, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's certainly provide a lot of variety for make commentary on and to try and illustrate and talk about some of the issues we face in police. So yeah, quite a good first year, I think.
And I should say we are streaming this live on Global Player if you want to watch as well. And if you'd like to ask Steve a question during the course of this hour about any aspect of policing, it doesn't have to be about the Casey report, but I imagine many of you will have questions about the conclusions that Louise Casey came to on 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850 or say, Alexa, send a comment to LBC. I was reading something yesterday, then somebody was saying that it was in the Times, I think, and I'm trying to remember the columnist and I can't. But anyway, she was suggesting that Mark Rowley is so steeped in the Met that he isn't really the ideal person to implement the recommendations of the Casey report. And she was saying that Louise Casey should be the new Metropolitan Police Commissioner and implement her own report, which at first I thought, well, that would be an interesting thing to do. It would be a courageous thing for any Home Secretary or Mayor of London to do. But I wonder whether there is a certain logic to that.
It's an interesting proposition, and I have to be careful because even though I'm the chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, Sir Mark Rowley is still my boss. He's the commissioner. So if I accepted that, I'd be making it redundant. So I have to be careful. I mean,
Alice Thompson was a columnist.
It's look. I mean, I think before they appointed Sir Mark, they did discuss about bringing in external candidates, which was perhaps a bit contentious because who do you get that's got the experience to turn around such an organisation? Certainly at the moment, from the things we're hearing, he is getting a grip with it with Damien Owens, who's his deputy, to provide some change. And I think they've made some good first impressions. I just hope that with this report that's come out now, it doesn't sit in a desk, it becomes actionable and it makes meaningful change because it needs to.
But he doesn't even accept the main conclusion that the Met is institutionally racist, misogynist and homophobic.
No, and I think he's been grilled several times. I think he was on at the town hall yesterday trying to talk about it, and I think Louise Casey was there as well trying to talk about why he should accept it. And it's, Sir Mark's in charge of the Met. It's down for him to accept that or not, as the case may be.
Do you accept it?
I don't, but perhaps not for the reasons that you think. I don't think it goes far enough. If you look at the labels of institutional racism, sexism and misogyny, and I finished reading some of the report tonight, I don't think it does it due service. I think some of it sits at gross incompetence or misconduct in public office, because some of my colleagues, members of the public, victims, have gone forward, been very brave to report crimes, stood up to be counted. They've been let down. Now, if I failed you came to me, Iain, as a victim, and I let you down, I'd be on a gross misconduct panel. Very senior officers have failed to deal with reports, suggestions, improvement plans, but they're not being taken to task. So for me, whilst I understand the driver behind it and the sentiment in Dame Louise Casey's report and tying it in with the Macpherson definition, I think it sits far higher than that, and it needs action. It needs to be looked at properly to make sure that senior leaders start to get a grip, deal with it, so that we have confidence in challenging inappropriate behaviour, but so do the public.
But that's a basic failure of leadership then, isn't it? Because if gross incompetence, as you put it, is allowed to fester, nothing will ever get better unless it's wiped out from a leadership role.
Absolutely. And you look at the structure we have in place when it comes to our annual appraisal time, that my annual appraisal is done top down. When do I ever get a chance to feed into a sergeant and inspectors, a superintendent's or the commissioner's annual appraisal? It doesn't happen because it's hierarchical. I think that needs to change. If it's called 360 feedback, which I believe it is, can we feed into it? Because that might help. If you start to feed things up from the ground, yes, he has a very difficult job to do, and can he be all over police? And he can't. He has to rely on his subordinates and other ranking officers to do that. But when you've raised so many issues repeatedly and they're not getting through, something's wrong. So it does need to change, and it's got to happen now, because if it doesn't, we'll never ever change it and policing is ruined.
There's one thing that, who was I interviewing the other day about it? It must have been on Tuesday. And whoever it was quoting a bit from, I think it was in Louise Casey's report, where there was apparently a meeting of senior officers before the Sarah Everard vigil to discuss how to police it. And we all know that it didn't go very well. And a female officer piped up and said, well, maybe we should just police it with female officers. Mm-hmm. And that was stamped on immediately because they thought, oh no, well, the men wouldn't like it. And I mean, okay, I'm from outside it, but I just think if I'd been chairing that meeting, I don't know whether Cressida Dick was there or not, but if she was, I would have thought, what a brilliant idea. Let's run with this. And okay, if it puts a few people's noses out of joint, so be it. That is called leadership, isn't it?
It is. It's about surrounding yourself by people that have got more experience than you sometimes, listening to it. And what do they have to lose by trying it? You could have had male officers in reserves quite locally nearby, sat in carriers waiting to deploy to assist, but it might have worked. And the way you're taught as a police officer, you start at the lowest possible level and build up until you need to sort of match the response that's required. So if you feed it inappropriately, they could have tried it. Is it male bravado? Possibly.
The lines are open 0345 6060 I'm particularly keen to hear from members of yours, actually, members of the Police Federation. And we can change your name if you don't want to put your real name or location through. We'll happily talk to you anonymously. But it's very important, I think, in weeks like this, and I suspect you'll agree with this, that we don't just concentrate on all of the bad things that were in that report. I thought, having listened to LBC throughout the day, on the day that this came out, I thought I want to do something a little bit different on my show and not just sort of, well, how can the police regain our trust, which is the main question, I suppose, that comes out of this. But I think we have to also acknowledge the brave work, the important work that most police officers do every single day of the week, but feel completely undermined at the moment because all the media narrative is about all the bad things. Now, I've done plenty of phone-ins over the past year or two on all of the bad things, and it's important that we do those because you can't sweep them under the carpet. But if I was a serving police officer listening to this litany of terrible things that have happened, I would feel completely demotivated. I would wonder what people were thinking about me as I was going about my ordinary work every day. Are they thinking I'm one of these bad apples? And even the phrase bad apples we now apparently can't use because it's more than the odd one.
Yeah. Interesting. I was talking to a police officer walking past my house today, so I went outside, grabbed him and said, look, I'm doing some interviews today. Do you mind if I ask your opinion? And one of them was about the 5-year licence of practice which had been suggested. And one of them was about how has the Casey report impacted you? And he said, funnily enough, we found a lost or stolen motor vehicle today. And the guys that came to recover it said, why is the 2 or 3 of you stood around this car? You're rapists, you're sexist. Oh, that's the impact the report has had, that some people aren't digging beneath that. Every single day, there are thousands of honest, decent cops doing a great job. I guarantee today, by 11:59 tonight, there was probably been 10 to 11,000 calls from members of the public to the Met saying, 999, we need help. Is that a loss of confidence?
11,000 in one evening?
Throughout the day.
Right.
So the clock starts at midnight 01 and it goes to 24 hours. 11,000 calls, 10 to 11 every single day, and it peaks in the summer period. So that's a lot of people calling. Others might be able to give you different figures across the country. People are calling police because they want help. Are there concerns about our colleagues? Yes, there are. But I'd like to think now that this is the catalyst for meaningful change. It has to, and it needs people like me to speak up for the good side of police officers, because there are some incredibly good jobs. We'll have our bravery awards in July. Already we've got 37 out of 43 forces have put some really, really good, strong candidates forward for levels of bravery which go above and beyond normal levels of policing. That needs to be put out there properly. So there's some great work being done every day, uniformed detectives. And let's not forget that we're the ones that arrest and prosecute our own. Cousins Carrick, Dame Louise Casey commented on the investigation that Cousin said that was by far the best investigation she's seen, or worse to that effect. We did that as police officers. No one else does it. So we can take pride, I think, in what we do, but I fully understand if officers are feeling damaged and battered by the onslaught. But then we get accused of being defensive. We try and say, look, it's not every day that those things happen, and it's trying to find the balance to get it right for the public.
Now, the Casey report was all about the Met, but there are 43 different police forces throughout England, more in Wales. I haven't seen, and maybe I've been sort of watching or listening to the wrong channels, I haven't seen a single chief constable come out and say, well, we're taking this seriously. We're very worried about the conclusions in this report. We believe that we run a really good police force here in Shropshire, Norfolk, wherever. But there are probably some lessons that we need to learn as well. I haven't seen anybody doing that.
You're absolutely right. And I feel quite lonely sometimes in being the voice for police officers. I represent 140,000 colleagues up and down the country. So Mark Rowley's been out speaking for them, but not many other senior leaders are. We've had lots of statements put out there. Are they uncomfortable about speaking about it? Probably. But if they're in denial, they're wrong. Anecdotally, I've been told that some very senior leaders across the country are saying it's not in my force. It is. You need to understand that there are levels, perhaps not on the levels we've seen in the Met, but it will be there, because if we're saying it's attractive to officers to come into Metropolitan Police to be that type of bullying, narcissistic individual, it's going to be to other force areas as well. So it is there, sadly, but let's get ahead of the game. Let's deal with it, find out what it is, do the data, and all forces are going what's called through a data wash now, doing the vetting and the checks on the police national databases to find them. When you get hold of them, deal with them properly and robustly and get rid of them. And once my colleagues see that happening, that puts in checks and balances to stop other inappropriate behaviour. So, yeah, they need to. But I do wish there was Chief Constable with me tonight trying to talk about the issues that Casey and other reviews are going to bring up.
Do you think there is a difference between urban police forces and rural ones? Because I don't know whether I'm on the right track here, but it seems to me that if you are working for a large metropolitan force, whether it's London, Manchester, Birmingham, wherever, it's probably easier to get away with some of these things than it is in some of the smaller forces.
Interesting, because talking to colleagues, we just had one of our national council meetings, which is the sort of national federation meeting in Cardiff the last couple of days. And you look at some of my, one of my colleagues, Jim from Devon and Cornwall, pointed out that in his force area, 40% of his officers under 3 years service. So it's a different dynamic in certain forces. It could be sometimes harder to report inappropriate actions in a smaller force because it might be your your mate works on the professional standards, who knows the deputy chief constable. So if you report something, it goes nowhere. So there's a certain amount of pressure, because if you then step out of line to report something, your career's effectively finished. You'll still be a police officer, but you're on your own. So it's maybe easier to hide in a more metropolitan force. Doesn't make it right, and there should be those processes in place where anybody could speak up properly and safely to deal with it. It's a different kind of policing in rural areas, but they have significant issues that we don't in an urban area. You know, if I call for help in the Met, I get help normally, if I'm in central London, within minutes. When I was working in East London, it might be 20 minutes. In the home counties, more rural areas, it could be an hour, 2 hours sometimes. Go to Wales, where they don't have the police stations in place. You could be looking at a 2-hour wait to get help and assistance. That's wrong. That's unacceptable for the public, but also for my colleagues.
Ian has texted to say, did Steve really just take credit for investigating Wayne Couzens? Really? It's funny, when you said that, I did think, shall I question him on that? And I think I should have done, because Wayne Couzens could have been caught a long time before he was. And okay, he was eventually brought to justice, similarly with Carrick, but there were so many opportunities missed to do so.
Absolutely. I wasn't taking credit for me at all.
I know,
but
not for
the
you,
service.
but the service.
No, I fully accept that. But if you look at what Dame Louise Casey said, that she thought the investigators were very thorough, very professional, and made some very praiseworthy comments around how once they got hold of the information, they dealt with it, prosecuted it, and did a good job. And this is about saying you're amazing. Yes, he should have been prevented. And if I knew the fuller details, then were there opportunities missed? Quite probably, yes. But that should never have happened. So let's look at what didn't happen there.
It was actually called, his nickname was the rapist, wasn't it? I mean, that was a pretty big clue, I would have thought.
Absolutely. And how did that not go unchecked locally, local supervision? It's incredibly disappointing. So no, I don't gloat when we say that, but it was an illustration to say that we are unique. The fact that we have our own offenders in the service, we will then arrest them, prosecute them, and put them before the courts for the public to decide.
Tom in Sevenoaks says, I grew up trusting the police without question, and I never thought that would change. I know most police officers are decent and honest, but how can we tell who is and who isn't? The police are now so severely damaged that I don't think I'll ever be able to trust them again. It's really concerning. And I mean, that it is concerning to get a text like that, because I mean, I would put myself into that category, and I'd never have thought to have sort of questioned in the way that I think a lot of people are doing now.
Absolutely. I understand it with all the media around the negativity in policing. It's very easy to think there are corrupt officers out there and they're all corrupt, but they're not. You know, even Dame Louise Casey accepts that in the report that there are a vast majority of officers that are decent, honest, hard-working, and do an incredibly job day in, day out. If people read the report properly, that would hopefully give them some solace that there are good ones there available to do the call, and it's incumbent on all of us that aspire to be the best we possibly can to call that out and say, not in our name, not anymore. It's unacceptable. And, you know, I did a radio show earlier and we were talking about how a Sikh officer had his beard cut and someone put bacon in a Muslim officer's locker. How did that even come across an officer's brain to do that? I don't understand it. You're a cop to do the right things in life, not the wrong things.
Right, we'll come to your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973. It's 18 minutes past 8.
LBC
8 on LBC. Steve Hartshorn is with us, Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, and not the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, as one of you on text seems to think. One day, Steve, one day. Right, let's go to Tim in Scunthorpe. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Ian. How are you? Good to speak to you again. Hi, Steve.
Good evening, Tim.
I've got a question. I'm 58 years of age. My working life quick 5 seconds on my CV. I started, to give you an idea, I started my working career in the middle 80s. I joined the army and was a Royal Military policeman. Subsequent to that, I've done postings, 5 years specialised in Northern Ireland, etc., working with the IUC at the time. Come out of that, went to the Merchant Navy, very much a front of house, middle management position as well, and recently I lost my job in September, working with the local authority. I had about 30-odd guys under my belt, but, to supervise. Can I ask you a question? Why can't I become a policeman?
Great question. I don't know why. Unless there's an age limit, I'm not aware of there being an upper limit.
That's my point. I'm 58 years of age. There's an age limit. And what I wanted to just make the point on is the fact that if we're looking at a diverse representation in the police force of this country, this nation, why not go for people with not necessarily a degree? A degree will show you or any police sort of candidate selection board that I can follow a course of study and complete it. Well, life experience, I can tell you, I know what it's like to lose, as Ian knows, a 19-year-old nephew in Afghanistan. I know what it's like to lose my son a year before last under tragic circumstances. In terms of life experience, I think I've got what it takes. I don't know how I can demonstrate that apart from give a CV. But you know what doesn't tick the box? The fact that I'm 58 years of age. Now, at a time when my pension's not going to kick in possibly till I'm 70, surely 10 years or 15 years where I can give the nation and give back to society is worth more than a degree to you.
No, the normal retirement age for police officers is 55, I think, isn't it? I mean, you don't have to retire at that age, but you can continue if you're physically able. I don't know what your state of physical health is, Steve, but I'll tell you what, I'm 2 years ahead of you. There's no way that I could be a police officer. I just wouldn't be able to cope with it physically.
You'd be surprised. I mean,
I swim every day. I mean, ex-military. I don't smoke.
Okay.
I mean, Tim, have you actually applied and been declined because of your age?
No, but I was told that it's a waste of time because when you look at I'm with I'd be with the Humberside Force, and I'm being told that my age would negate me from making an application.
In a way, you can understand it though, can't you? Because you would have to have quite a lot of training, and in the end, if you're only there for 2 or 3 years or 5 years, they're going to think, well, I'd rather spend the money training somebody in their 20s.
But that's what I'm saying. When you say 2 or 3 years, this is what I'm trying to get at. I'm 58 years of age. If you're telling, what am I going to be doing? We're being told to come back into the workplace, people who are in retirement. Right, let's do that. So I'm 58. So you tell me how many years I should have left to give back into society. If you're saying that I'm not worth the next 10 or 15 years,
I'm not.
Then, right, I know you're not. No, sorry. What I meant to say, if the government is then saying that I'm not worth, or not be able to, because it's not of monetary value, well, what do you want? Do you want me to give the society 15 years worth, possibly, until I am able to retire, and give that experience and give that understanding and give that diversity back into my society, the people who I basically grew up with?
All right, Tim, thank you very much. Let's move on to Pauline in Watford. Pauline, hello.
Hello, Ian. I'm glad to be able to speak to this police officer. I'm a very old grandmother of a black grandson. And the thing that causes me concern is, given that in the Guardian newspaper on the 19th of February, the heading that says, black people are 7 times more likely to die after police restraint in the UK, I'm wondering what sort of training is being given to our police officers when they have to restrain, especially rambunctious young teenagers. When I see somebody kneeling on the back of a child, I know the risk of broken ribs and arrest is great. So what sort of training are people being given to do things safely if they have to restrain somebody?
Thank you for the question. There is a nationally mandated training package it used to be called officer safety training. Now I think it's personal safety training. So you get taken through the very basics of how to tow what's called a normal police hold, through arrest and restraint techniques using handcuffs, batons, If you then become equipped with a taser, use a taser. And then you should have annual refresher training where we talk about things called positional asphyxia, where if I was to, say, take Iain, arrest him, put him on the floor, I wouldn't keep him on his chest or his front for too long because that could lead to a medical episode. We get taught about things called excited delirium, where people can have an adverse reaction to being restrained, and how to pick up certain triggers that you might notice if someone's being or acting unusually, bearing in mind you don't know what their usual self is. So there is the package of awareness. And of course, it's not always correct. Sometimes people might be on drink, drugs. They don't react how we expect them to do, so we have to perhaps apply more rigorous techniques. Sometimes it might involve 4, 5, 6 officers to control the individual. It's not a perfect science, but there is a national training package which officers have and should adapt it and use it appropriately.
How often do female officers get involved in those sort of situations? Because one of the suggestions is that, well, if you had a 50-50 gender split, that would have an impact. But the natural thing is to think, well, okay, but I mean, women are not generally, I'm generalising here, not as physically strong as male officers. And in that situation, that could be an issue, couldn't it?
It could be, but I've seen some very, very capable female officers. And indeed, sometimes it's better to deploy a female resource because generally most men won't hit or attack a woman. So if you use the skills you've got, again, surround yourself by great people, let them use their skills first, bearing in mind that you've always got to be ready to react to the unexpected. It's a technique to try and use, and we should start looking at those other skills and be more thinking about what we do and how we use our officers properly. So it's never a no, we can try it, but obviously we don't want officers to be injured, and it's making sure the appropriate officer or technique is used depending on the situation.
Pauline, thank you very much. Dave says, I'm embarrassed to tell people I'm a serving police officer. 18 years in the Met. I've never felt so miserable. If a job offered the same take-home pay tomorrow, I'd leave. How often are you hearing that?
Quite a lot, sadly. And we never used to have officers leaving the service from around the 25-year point onwards, but we're now starting to see a bit of an exodus. Normally we have about 6,000 to 7,000 attrition rate in the country. Last year it went to just over the 8,000 mark, and we anticipate it will be more, partly because of the paying conditions, partly because of the case where people are embarrassed to say I'm a cop. Indeed, I did an interview with the BBC the other week, and I got to BBC Centre at 5:30 in the morning. I spent half hour talking to the reception staff about being there, doing an interview on the breakfast show, etc. And then I came away after the interview and they were still there about to go and said, how did it go? What were you talking about? I said, we're talking about police officer pay. Instant dislike for the fact I was a police officer.
Really?
And my heart sank. An hour before, we had a really good conversation. I can't get away with saying I'm not a police officer because my face is all over social media. Dave, please be proud of being a police officer. It takes a lot to do the job and it's difficult, and I fully understand that, but stand up, be counted, be proud. If you need help doing that, go to your local federation, speak to your local supervisors. It's something we can do to give you that confidence to say you are a police officer, but I fully understand it if people don't want to be anymore because it's challenging.
I mean, it might be nice, actually. We see these pictures in American airports of Americans going up to serving soldiers and thanking them for what they do. Yeah. Might be an idea sometimes if we did that here with not just police officers but people in the front line. I think that would actually mean quite a lot, wouldn't it?
It would, and it actually happened once when we were at King's Cross Station grabbing a coffee when I was on response cars. And there was 2 cars got together, we ordered some drinks. And just before we sat down, a member of the public came over with his suitcase, ready to go on the Eurotunnel, and said, guys, I'd like to say thanks very much. I'd like to buy you all some food and drink. That was the best thing that happened to us for months. We're very suspicious if the public buys drink, thinking what they put in it, what have they done. The guy was genuine. He said, look, I'll buy you some drinks. And he left it to it. It was great. It would be nice, but not everyone thinks the same. That they value service in the States. I don't think we do over here.
No, and we're also less expressive. I mean,
yes.
Americans are very... have you ever seen an American who's frightened of a microphone being stuck in front of their faces, whereas in this country, people shy away from it?
Yes.
But, I mean, do that. If you see a police officer on the streets tomorrow, yeah, I know all the jokes, just go up to them and thank them for what they do. It doesn't cost you anything. It's just a nice thing to do. Right, we'll take more calls in a minute with Steve Hartshorn. It's 8:31. News headlines with Darragh Jackson.
The Bank of England's decided to raise interest rates again as part of ongoing efforts to control inflation. The base rate's been raised to 4.25%. A further 4 days' worth of walkouts have been announced by junior doctors. The British Medical Association says the strikes have been called after talks with the government broke down. And transgender athletes who've been through male puberty are to be banned from women's athletics events. Lord Coe, the president of the sport's governing body, says it's vital to protect the female category. LBC weather this evening: rain will clear in the south, but the west may see some showers, scattered showers in the north, and a low of 6 degrees.
This is LBC.
Hartshorn, Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, is with me. You can watch us on Global Player. We're taking your calls 0345 6060 973. Jeff is in Woking. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Ian. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Jeff.
Can I start off by saying that I'm convinced that the majority of police officers throughout the country do a fantastic job and are honest and true, just a few that spoil it, But what I'm concerned about, Steve, is the amount of police stations that have been closed down throughout the country. And, they've been sold off or they've been turned into supermarkets or shops or whatever, And does that have an adverse effect on the way you can do your job?
It does, and thank you for taking the time to articulate that, because we notice it certainly in London, the closure of police stations. But if I speak to my colleagues in Wales who are having to travel many, many miles or hours to get to a police station, it means as a member of the public, if you want to pop in, you can't. It means that if we are working effectively in a warehouse, we're probably tucked on an industrial estate, well away from where we need to be to see the members of the public. So you don't see us effectively. For me, I would like there to be lots more local police stations where my colleagues can be to talk to members of the public. in these more detention centres, so we don't have to travel so far. But sadly, the cuts we've had to make because of austerity mean that local police bosses have had to sell off premises to generate funds. Please write to your MP and voice your concerns over that, because if we can get support to get some money back, that would really, really help.
Just a second, Jeff. 4 in 10 police stations have closed since 2010.
Shocking.
I mean, it's... Yeah. I don't know what I would have thought that figure would be, but LBC did an investigation of this recently. It's one per week is being shut.
Yeah.
And if you don't see police officers patrolling the streets, which that's a common complaint, that people don't see that as much, and you can't visit a local police station, and even quite sizable towns now don't have a police station, then you don't have any contact with the police. So therefore, you hear things on the radio or watch news programmes on the television, you form a view which may not be relevant to your local constabulary, but you form that view because of the national picture.
Yeah, and police officers want to work locally. They want to parade locally where they are, because if you take them away from a town centre, all right, they might not always be in the police station during the shift, but they'll go back there at the beginning and the end of the shift. They'll go back for their refreshment break during the shift. They're available to talk to. And it helps build community confidence. If you see police, you'll feel safer. It has a deterrent effect when you've got police cars and police officers around. But they are beyond our control. It needs funding to get them back.
Jeff, I interrupted you. Sorry.
Sorry, no. I mean, the thing is, with police stations, if there are no police stations around for people to pop in with a query or produce documents or whatever, they're going to clog up the phones, which are already very busy. The emergency numbers, and I mean, in Woking, where I am, the police are having to share a supermarket, public car park for their vehicles. There's no place for them to park. And also I'm concerned about I think it was about 6 months ago, they said there were 20,000 police officers short throughout the country. Has there any progress been made on that?
Well, actually, I've got a text here on exactly that, Jeff, from Thomas, who says, I'm currently a couple of years into training in the Met Police. I'm 28 and had previously worked in finance before wanting to do something far more fulfilling and worthwhile. While the Casey report has been a shock, I still cannot wait until I can leave the classroom and get out on the streets helping London. One worry I have is that with the 20,000 new officers initiative winding down this month or next month, surely this should be the moment where more recruitment should be key to bring in the new minds that are needed to reverse the problems that have permeated the Met for decades.
He's right, and I sit on the Police Uplift Programme as a representative for the Police Federation, and the Uplift Programme stops in March. Some of the figures coming out that we have to look at now is that we need to annually recruit about 9,000 officers every year just to stand still to retain and replace the exodus from policing. That's not good. That's an annual uplift every single year. So if in 3 years' time, if we lose 8,000 to 9,000, we're going to be where we are 10 years ago. We're going to lose them again.
So why is this programme stopping?
Funding. It was an initiative by the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson to put back the 20,000 that we lost through cuts in policing. It's a sticking plaster. We'd already said that you need to recruit at least 45 to 55,000 to not only backfill the 20,000, but to give a genuine uplift. What the 20k has been is effectively a replacement programme for the officers we had taken away. But again, as we talked about earlier, we think we're going to lose more officers as a result of this report. We're going to go, it's not worth staying. And credit for, as was it Thomas, who wants to get out there when he's finished training. Good, fantastic. Go and enjoy yourself. You'll really enjoy policing.
Jeff, thank you for your call. Let's go to Richard in Edgware. Hello, Richard.
Hey, hi, how are you? I'd just like to say, contrary to what a lot of people are saying, I have nothing but the respect for the police, the young men and women that get out there, put the uniform on, put themselves on the front line every day. I'm ex-military. I worked very closely with the RUC for 6 years, and I own a security company now, so I have quite a lot of interaction with the police not on a day-to-day basis, but quite regularly. And every single one of them, men and women, are absolutely superb. And apart from a couple of bad apples, they ought to hold their heads up high, and the vast majority of the public think they do a fantastic job.
Thank you. That's very kind of you, and it's good to hear. And I hope that reassures my colleagues out there who feel disheartened, and the previous caller that's not wanted to say that they're a police officer, because they're the kind of comments that the public need to hear. There are some really, really good officers out there doing sterling work every single day. They'll be out there tonight protecting the people of this country. That's good. Thank you.
Richard, thank you very much for that. Right, let's take a couple of texts. Captain Kirk has texted to say the police are walking away, serious shortages, no continuity experience. The young cops see it as a 4-year job. The last 15-year recruitment model is the root of most of the problems. How do we repair?
I think we need to get back to policing being a 30, 40-year career.
Is that true that a lot of young police officers think it's just a 4-year job and then they move on to something else?
If you go back as far as when, I believe, David Cameron was a Prime Minister, I think he started talking about making it a 4 to 5 year career, come in, do different jobs, dipping in and out of policing. Policing needs experience. That's been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt now. You know, when I joined, it was a view to do your 30-year career because that's when you get your pension at whatever age you join. But you can stay on now because the new pension rules mean you can stay until 67. We need people to come into policing to stay for a very long time because you get the experience, you then need that experience to train the new people. It's sad if people come for a short time because I don't think you get that investment in return on the initial training and you lose so much by leaving early.
Nick in Slough says, we have 43 different police services in our country. Is it not time that we have a national vetting, the same across the board? At the moment, each 43 forces have different entry levels. Really doesn't make sense.
There should be. There's some work being done now by the College of Policing to provide a new national standard for vetting. I've got colleagues at the National Board at the Police Federation, excuse me, who sit on that group, so there should be some national standards coming out very, very soon.
And Andy says, with the fire brigade now getting a bigger pay rise for 2022-23 of now 7%, and ambulance workers getting a one-off extra payment for the year, making their pay rise close to 7%, will the Federation be looking for police officers to receive the same uplift in pay? And what are the chances of us getting it? Or because we can't strike, are we going to have to put up with a lower level pay rise again?
Right. A couple of weeks ago now, we launched our 17% pay campaign. We had the report done by the Social Market Foundation, which looked at the pay deterioration over the last 20 years. And they've come out and said that in that 20 years, police officers have suffered a 17% pay cut. So we put our pay campaign at saying that's the minimum that we would like. And if you look at what the fire brigade have had, they have different terms and conditions of how they can negotiate their pay. They've had a 7% offer and then a 5% next year, that's 12%. By asking for 17%, it matches what the fire brigade get. But also our current pay doesn't take into account what's called the P factor, which is for the additional restriction of private lives of not having the right to resort to industrial action, the restrictions on secondary employment and other things that we don't have that a normal employee would have. I think 17% is reasonable, but the only people that can implement that, and people think that we decide as the Federation we don't, is the Home Office and Chief Constables. They need to look at that and start honouring the agreement they had for that not having the right to strike in 1919. They've broken the promises. They will fix that, but that's down to them.
But of course the nurses wanted 19% and they've settled for 5%.
Yes, they have. But I think if you look at the nursing population, it's far greater than policing. I've said in the various meetings I've been to with the Home Office, the Home Secretary, the Police Minister, that there's about 146,000 cops in total from PC to Commissioner rank in the country. We are statistically insignificant that if you was to give us a 17% pay rise, it won't affect inflation.
How much would it cost?
Probably millions. Probably.
Well, of course it would be. Would it be billions?
Very, very finger in the air figure, 800 million. I'm guessing. I'm going if the last pay rise we had, I think was 5 to 8%, depending on your pay banding, 400 million. But it needs new money to come in.
I have to say I'm slightly surprised that if you're putting forward a 17% pay rise, you haven't automatically got the cost of that at your fingertips.
I don't. It may well be in report. I don't actually have that figure. It's probably there that the problem with my job, Ian, is I read so much. Some things come in, some things go out. I should have the figure. We will have it somewhere and we can always feed it into you.
Because I think the problem that a lot of people have now is that these figures are bandied about sort of 800 million, 1.2 billion, whatever. And that all has to be paid for from somewhere. And the Home Secretary will have her budget set by the Treasury and she has to make the decision as to how to allocate it. I mean, she's just bunged the French 500 million to deal with the boat, so that they can usually find money if they really want it.
Yes.
But you're not seriously expecting to get 17%, are you?
I want it for my members. I'm serious when we ask for 17%. We don't have the right to negotiate like every other trade union has. Our pay is imposed. So at the moment, I know the Superintendents Association and the Chief Police Officers have engaged with the Police Remuneration Review Body to put their case forward. Smart roll is, I think, asked for 17%, and as a minimum, it should be the cost of inflation. So does it sound unreasonable? It probably does to many people, but given that we haven't had those pay rise over the last 20 years, if I was to go back 10 years, it would be 25 to 30% deficit in our pay. So 17% to me is reasonable. It's what I'd like for the members, but the decision isn't mine. That sits with the Home Secretary.
Right. This is from an anonymous texter saying, I'd like to say thanks to Steve for being so honest and open about the shortcomings of the police. More people in leadership positions should speak frankly like this when things go wrong. It's where change starts. That's actually quite profound, isn't it? That's where change starts. Because if you don't recognise the problem, you can never bring about a solution. That's
right. And that's why, at the start of the show when I talked about do I accept certain things, I think it's far serious than what's been said. It's we have to look at this report now, deal with it properly. You go back every year, we get reports into policing that what it needs, what it doesn't need. This is a seminal point now that if we get behind it, something can be done very, very quickly. There must always be a transparent process of how we deal with ineffective, corrupt officers. Absolute power for chiefs could be dangerous. Let's have the balance properly so evidence is tested and used, and then we get rid of them so they never enter policing again, and that's the fair way to go forward.
Right, more calls in a minute to Steve Hartshorn, Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales. It's 8:47.
LBC.
BC, Steve Hartshorn is here, Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales. The number to call, 0345 6060 973. Right, let's go to Dave in Norwich. Hello, Dave.
Good evening, Steve. How are you? I'm ex-job, ex-Met, ex-CID officer. I ring in to confirm I agree with the guy earlier on saying that military veterans need urgently to be recruited into the Met because London now is in a real state, as is the rest of the country. I still, even though I live in Norfolk now, just outside Norwich, I go to London quite frequently and speak to people in the area where I used to work as a uniformed PC, JW, Walthamstow, and they say they've got no respect for the police, but back in the day when us military people were there, they did very, very well. And I think this should be done urgently. I tried to speak to Priti Patel before she went, but ignored. But the vast majority of people agree with that, and no doubt you do as well.
I do, and I think there's some great skills from the military, communications being key, command and control, decision-making, medical skills, physical skills. I do believe there is some work being done with the military now on a sort of transition process that if you're thinking of leaving the military, you can get ahead of the game and sort of get some of the entry work done before you come into policing. It's a great option, and I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, well, it's just, as an ex-Met officer, I mean, I did 21 years. I broke my back on duty and obviously got cast out. But when I look at the Met, back at the day when I joined the Metropolitan Police Force, as far as I'm concerned, the Metropolitan Police have been destroyed by the political system because in the early 1980s, they changed their name from the Metropolitan Police Force to the Metropolitan Police Service. Women police officers had the W's taken off them, PCs, and then they started closing down police stations left, right and centre. And, as you were, though, as a uniformed officer out on the streets, certainly were at Walthamstow, where I did my first initial 2 years, the people were really, really pleased with it. They'd come up to you, speak to you, give you information. Now, you don't do it. But the crime rise in London and across the country is being hidden, and the police are in a really bad position. And we've got to desperately sort it out.
When were you in Walthamstow, Dave?
Well, I started off at 79.
Oh, I used to live in Walthamstow. I missed you.
Well, it's all gone now. I mean, I seriously, I go down there. I speak to guys. As a kid, I grew up with West Indian kids at school, and I go and speak to them now when they're down there, and they say they got no respect for the police, and with the gangs that are down there, nothing's been done about them because there's no insufficient police on the streets. And where I live now, not so much Norwich, but you go to Great Yarmouth, that's exactly the same.
It's a war zone, Great Yarmouth, Dave.
It is. Well, you go and look there now and see. So I'm not being nasty or racist, but one of the worst groups of foreigners I had to deal with were Roma Gypsies, and Great Yarmouth is full of them. And are there any police on the streets? No, there aren't. It's really, really annoying and upsetting.
I will pass your comments on to my friend Brandon Lewis when I next see him, the MP for Great Yarmouth. Thank you very much for that. Just on a similar note here, a text says, when I was younger, I'm 42 now, we had a local bobby in our village. We hated him, but at the same time respected him, and it kept us in order. I couldn't tell you who or where they come from now. Bring back community policing as soon as possible. I have lots of stories about how they helped me when I was younger. I mean, this whole idea that we can go back to the days of Dixon of Dock Green, I mean, it is for the birds, isn't it? But on the other hand, neighbourhood policing is important, and yet it's been diminished in importance deliberately by government policy over the last 10 or 15 years.
It has, and of course, Dixon of Dock Green got shot and killed.
Did he?
He did. It might be for the birds, but there is some solid reasoning, and if you get officers back on the beat, that shows a visible presence, that helps to deter and dissuade some types of crime. It builds confidence because members of the public can go and speak, but it's also a great intelligence gathering. And I was listening to some people talking the other day about how the covert services work. Yes, they might have very high-level technical interventions, but they get a lot of their intel from police officers speaking to members of the public, by hearing what's being said, by knowing the ground, by knowing the criminals, of who's moving, who's active. That actually is a bigger input than sometimes some of the more high-level interventions you have to make. So it needs both. We need local cops on the ground, we need detectives in police stations to help facilitate investigating the crimes, and we need a mixture of officers to be out there responding to the urgent 999 calls, and your specialist skill setters behind that to support the frontline policing.
Sue is in Guildford. Hello, Sue.
Oh, hi, gentlemen. I just wanted to reaffirm and say that I love the police. I think they're wonderful. I think we're very, very lucky. OK, we have a few bad apples, but I think they are few and far between, and we shouldn't let that colour our judgment. I'm also very proud that my 14-year-old granddaughter has just joined police cadets, and I'm delighted But I'm also worried when I see programmes on TV where you see police being abused, spat at, sworn at, called pigs. I think they ought to bring in some really hefty fines for people who do that. It's appalling.
And your 14-year-old daughter, does she actually want to go into the police? Is that her eventual aim?
Yes, she's my granddaughter. But yes, she does. She's very enthusiastic.
Why?
I think she just... I don't really know, if I'm honest. I think she wants to feel she's doing something for the community, and hopefully that any dealings she's had with the police have been positive. She's never really said, to be honest.
Well, it's a nice thing to hear, isn't it? Because, I mean, you've got to get the younger generation. I mean, I can remember at school, sort of you'd have police officers come in on careers evenings and all the rest of it. And there's got to be a bit of a Hearts and Minds PR campaign now, hasn't there?
Absolutely. In the VCC, the Volunteer Cadet Corps, when I first joined in my home ground of Dagenham, it was alive, it was kicking, it had so many people in it. It was a great starter to come in and see what police officers do. Many of those cadets, once they become 18 and a third, I think it was then, would then apply to join the police. It was a great proving ground. At Hendon, there used to be the cadet school where they could actually start doing it there as well at a younger age. It was good, but there's also, people can become special constables. They can volunteer to do the job, and we've got, I think it's just over 7,000 specials in the country. They do an amazing job. They've given over 2 million hours worth of free time to help policing. I think that equates to like £6 million worth of money which has been saved.
Toby in Surrey says, I don't buy it for a moment that most police officers are decent and honest. I believe that a few will be, but the majority do the job because they crave the power and influence which goes with the territory. And what type of character trait does that appeal to?
I think those that crave power are the wrong character type. Most police officers that I work with know and will resonate with are decent, honest, hard-working that want to go out to help fix and solve problems by the very nature of who they are. They do a very, very difficult job. Do we make mistakes? Yes, we do. But most of us want to learn from that to make it the best we possibly can. And look, we're never going to change some mindsets of what people think about us. I fully accept that. But if we can get back into seeing the public, as you just said, hearts and minds, talk to your local police officer, have a chat with them, see what they do, understand the roles that they're there for, I think it will help to create a better impression of police officers, because without police officers there would be anarchy.
So if you're from Dagenham, are you a fellow West Ham fan?
I'm not. I am.
I was going to offer you a weekly slot then, but now I won't.
No, I'm probably one of the few men in the country that doesn't follow football. It's not my thing. I've policed plenty of game, but no, football's not my game.
Oh, well, there we go. What a disappointment. But we will have you back again very soon. Thank you very much, Steve. That's Steve Hartshorn, Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales. Coming up in the next hour, parents who are separating will be forced to mediate disputes about access to children as part of plans to keep divisive battles out of court. When we've covered the subject of divorce on the programme in recent years, I have to say it's always appalling to